The old marketing adage was 7 times you had to have contact with the product before you even knew they existed, right? So that's why like a million commercials. We used to play the same song 300 times to hope you in 1 week, hoping you would hear it once, right? Now it's 24 times that something has to pass your eyeballs or whatever to sink in. So that quantity still has to be there. But if you keep saying I have a Coke and a smile over and over again, I'm like, dude, you're spamming me. I'm out, right? So you need these variables, the variations, and each of the variations can touch on different drivers, different values behind what it is you're selling.
You are listening to Power Marketing with Kevin Lee. Kevin and his agency Did It have helped thousands of businesses win through superior marketing, as have his books, articles, speaking engagements, and the E-Marketing Association Power Marketing Podcasts. Here's Kevin.
Hi, I'm Kevin Lee with the E-Marketing Association. Most of my day I spend running Did It, a 50-plus person digital marketing agency that actually does traditional as well. We've made a bunch of acquisitions. We mail millions of pieces of direct mail with custom QR codes on them to turn out Glengarry leads, which is sort of fun. I have my own brand, Truth Nutrition, that I use to run marketing experiments on, and I run a nonprofit, Giving Forward, in the cause marketing category. One of the hot topics, obviously, for the last couple of years is AI, and certainly social media and content creation are at the top of everybody's mind, as is SEO. So I'm super excited to be chatting with Bradley Chernis, who founded Lately.ai, and is sort of, found the need to sort of jump into the fray along with all the other AI companies, but in the content arena. So Kate, what was a catalyst for you saying, this needs to be done my way, the way I'm imagining it, and no one else is going to do it that way?
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Kevin. Hi, everybody. So I'm an OG of AI. I founded Lately 10 years ago. So in fact, 2014 was when generative AI was born to the world. So we were right on the same deadline or the same timeline. At the time, though, I didn't actually know that what we were building was AI. It wasn't what we had set out to do. And in the process, a mentor eventually came along and said, "Hey, let me introduce you to some people so you can, learn more about, what you're doing here." But for us, the journey all started from radio. So I think you know about me, but I'm not sure. So I used to be a rock and roll DJ. And my last gig was broadcasting to 20 million listeners a day at Sirius XM. And that's pertinent because I was really interested there in the theater of the mind, right? So just to refresh any younger listeners, back in the day, radio was a big deal, was what we had. And you couldn't Google people. You didn't know what they looked like. And so the theater of the mind was the act of having your imagination fill in the blanks. Maybe you didn't have the album art yet. So you're thinking about the music in a different way. You're listening to the DJ. Everything was this kind of soundscape going on. And it was very exciting because there was, not so many channels on TV, let's say. But you would have this same experience in reading, right, Kevin? So you read your favorite book and then you go see the movie and you're kind of pissed off unless it's Dune because it doesn't really convey what you had imagined in your mind, right? And that's because that imaginative experience is so powerful. And what I learned was that when the imagination kicks in for theater of the mind, it's tugging on nostalgia and memory and emotion to help you sort of not only fill in the blank, but to give you ownership in the story. And that was fascinating because we had so many listeners that thought I was talking to them directly. They felt this ownership, right? And I was like, well, what is this parallel between wielding the mic and wielding the pen? And it was kind of creepy sometimes, frankly, But I read a book by Daniel Levitin called This Is Your Brain on Music. So diving into the neuroscience of music listening. And guess what? When your brain listens to a new song, it must instantly access every other song you've ever heard. And in this moment, it's running down all these familiar touch points so it knows where to index that new song in the library of the memory of your brain. And as it does that, it tugs on nostalgia and memory and emotion. And I was like, okay, I am right. There is a connection. And so then it occurred to me, all right, well, when Kevin writes me an email or a text or anything, I'm going to read that text and hear his voice in my mind. In his voice, like a song, because both are sounds and both have frequencies. So his voice, I'm going to hear his voice in my head. And so if Kevin is really good at writing, he'll think, I have a way to cue nostalgia and memory and emotion in the reader here and make sure they feel that connection, that two-way street instead of a one-way street, right? Some kind of that valuable thing there is why I was turning listeners into fans or customers into evangelists. Like that's what the holy grail of marketing is, right, Kevin? Like it's
Absolutely.
you want the lead, of course you do. You want the sale, but then you want the megaphone, the flywheel of evangelists. And that's what we were being taught how to do in radio. So I took all these ideas and packaged them up and didn't really communicate what I was doing, but I took them to a little company, called Walmart. And I got them 130% ROI year over year for 3 years with what became the prototype for Lately.
So what exactly did Lately do, right, for Walmart and for other marketers who've started to experiment with it or are using it heavily?
Yeah. So, and that's the question. At the time, what we had done was there was this very unsexy industry called marketing resource management. And it had one big player called Percolate. They rose to the top and then had a fiery death. And then no venture capitalist would touch that market anymore. So at the time, I built this spreadsheet system for Walmart that was designed to be a marketing resource management system. Lots of spreadsheets, thousands, tens of thousands of rows, pulling together not only their social media activities and content, but I was looking for the patterns within and then taking what worked and translating it to paid or looking at the blogs we were writing and how can I glean that information. And there were over 20,000 marketers over this 3-year project with Walmart. So I had a lot of information to look at. And they were from businesses that were small, medium, large, for-profit, nonprofit. It was Bank of America, AT&T, Goodwill, United Way Worldwide, National Disability Institute, and the IRS. So like holy acronyms, Kevin, as you can imagine. Walmart owned a piece of software that was designed to help empower the poor through tax credits and financial education. And people living under the poverty line were many of their employees. So they had like a large interest in doing this project. So when we built Lately, which is my company, we were thinking, okay, well, let's try to democratize this. Let's give everybody the ability to do what Kate did for Walmart for 140 grand. So like a small business person, and to basically create a marketing army. And we would create one feature for each of the worksheets inside my spreadsheet system. That was the idea. And so we ended up creating an enterprise platform that we were trying to sell to SMBs, which was crazy, but we didn't know that. So we're like the opposite of Percolate, like Percolate for dummies or for the maker. But there's this one feature that everybody liked. And no, this is not going to sound amazing anymore, but it was amazing back in 2014. So imagine you just pushed a button and you got 40 social posts instantly that were tied to your analytics and in your voice. And you could schedule them out over time in just a few seconds across all the employees' social media platforms, your brand. Like I had 20,000 marketers I was trying to unite. So I made this like big, huge bicycle spoke brand hierarchy, right? But that's when it was in 2017, I believe. We were in an accelerator and someone came along and was like, would you like to meet the folks at IBM Watson and learn a few things? And we were like, yeah, that sounds great. So from there, we just started doubling down on the AI, and we don't have a large language model. That's not how we work. We have no language model. We focus on the AI around the math. So you give me your data, so your model, all of your social analytics is what we're looking at, and then I'm putting my math on that, extracting the patterns, and I'm helping you reproduce old content and brand new content that I know will be super high performing for you.
That's really awesome. One of the things, when you're building stuff that relies on existing data into sort of interpolate it and then predict what might work in the future is you have sort of critical mass issues with regards to, you need some data in there, right? And then all of a sudden you reach a tipping point where it's statistically relevant, whether you're using old school regression or you're using other forms of math, linear algebra, linear programming, et cetera. One way or another, you need enough data in there so
That's
that a
right.
learning system can learn, unless you're borrowing somebody else's data, right?
That's
So a
right.
lot of the AI platforms out there are sort of, well, in lieu of your own data, we'll go look at competitor data, for example, right? So that you know, Ray's Pizza can maybe learn from Domino's or Little
Right.
Caesars, right? And so I'd love to hear how you're thinking about that from the perspective of, like, particularly in the SMB category, which I hate because I've tried to sell into the SMB category on a
Yeah, I
couple of my
hate it too.
previous ventures. They have no money and they're high maintenance. So I prefer mid-market, and I actually don't particularly like enterprise either because you have a 24-month sales cycle at the enterprise level, and you sort of that middle is where people can be nimble and also have budget. So, but as we think about even some of those mid-market organizations who maybe never really bought into social, maybe because their categories are a little bit boring, right? To be honest, and
Right.
they don't always have anything to talk about, or they don't have anything to comment on, and so the data lake may be a little bit dry, right? So
Yeah.
how do you see a way to maybe accelerate that kind of a marketer into effective social media advertising if they're sort of a little late to starting the marathon, right? They're going to have to run extra fast.
Yeah, I stuck a lot of forks in my eyes as you were talking there because I've been, we've pivoted to all those categories
Yeah,
previously, and have found some consistencies within them, which has been surprising. But what you're saying is true. Like, not everybody is amazing, and certainly, like, if you're if you're hopeless, I'm not going to fairy godmother you into Gary Vaynerchuk. I mean, this is not going to happen. So we do have some pre-qualifications for the customers we know will succeed. But to your point, um, so we have four modes. So the first is, let's look at your actual data, analyze that, and find the best of. Right.
right,
That's the first. The second thing is me. So, like I said, my uber power, turning listeners into fans. So when I write posts on LinkedIn, I get 86,000 views. So we took hundreds of my best practices that I used at my agency, Walmart, and we'll bolster your best practices based on what we know, and it can be customized very much, like 100% fine-tuned into your voice and your audience, and because I can see maybe your writing won't be great, but I could see from your analytics what makes your unique audience click, like, comment, and share, and to make sure to always pepper that within.
sure,
And then lately, we'll also look at my brand. So, we've been a startup for a long time, and we're always looking to pinch some pennies and use our own products to market ourselves. And we have a 98% trial to sale conversion because the brand dog foods itself, right? So we have a lot of best practices there that we're able to then draw on as well. And then the last place, kind of to your point, is we never share the best practices of our customers at all, but we can see the patterns within and then use those to help you out as well.
yeah. I've got a related question, right? And it plagues probably like 70% of my clients, and over the years as well as current clients, which is that the, there's like a brand voice. But
Yeah,
then there's some cases where there's also sort of an internal evangelist who's a human, right? And if we sort of think through the years, especially if you lived in New York at the time, I mean, over the years, there have been all sorts of cases where the brand is sort of synonymous with the individual, right? And nationally, it would be like uh, Frank Purdue for chicken, like
sure. Yeah,
the Purdue and the Purdue, like they were synonymous, right? In the New York region, we had Tom Carvel, right, who was the
right.
Carvel brand, right? And then we had Crazy Eddie, who was this guy who owned an electronics retailer,
I
right?
remember him
And
well.
and and these were like inseparable, like the brand voice and the human voice were the same. But most companies have separated those out, partially because the investment community doesn't want like the brand of the individual and the brand to be synonymous, because now you're like, if anything happens to the individual, where's the enterprise value, right? So they're like,
Right.
no, no, the brand has to be, it has to have its own voice. But it, influencers have proved that the human voice matters, right? And so
Quite a lot.
now some brands are going back to, well, I don't really have an interesting voice of my own, but maybe I can rent a little bit of the Kardashian voice, right? Or take a little piece
Right.
of that, right? So they're like stuck in this conundrum because like the brand is boring, right? Doesn't really have its own voice. They
Yep.
could try to find an internal evangelist, but then they're sort of stuck with that situation. You've even got big brands like, Progressive. I don't know how much Flow makes at the moment, but I'm guessing it's pretty good, right?
Yeah.
Where they almost create their own monster, right? And they're like, okay, we created this person who is a person with that's part of the brand voice, but now, we're sort of stuck with them, right? So there are a lot of nuances to that as it relates to creating evangelisms around a brand and also leveraging the humanity of an individual, right? And maybe the AI individual is what they have to create, so they don't have to pay Flow anymore, because at least Geico's Gecko doesn't ask for a raise, right?
Right.
Um, so
Right.
like how does one like construct that and reconstruct that when one's starting to think about, okay, I've got my brand, and obviously I'm looking to build enterprise value for my brand. I'm looking to build sales for my brand. I'm looking to engage and delight my consumers as a brand, but it doesn't really have a voice, or the voice that it has doesn't have a personality to it.
Yeah. I mean, this is a huge problem. People are bad at marketing. This is why we're both in business.
Yes. Pays our
Right?
bills, right? Yeah.
Yeah, phase the bells, and I like to, come back to like the core of things, which is, our challenge is always it's the same as it was before generative AI, which is how do we cut through the noise? That's the
Right.
problem, right?
Yeah.
How do we stand out? How do we be not boring? Even when we're selling, hoses or whatever it is, hospital parts. I mean, I don't know, accounting. Sorry, accountants. But what I found marketing the IRS, let me tell you that even the IRS has fans, believe it or not. And the way that I tell people is a couple of things is to find that you touch on it, find the humanity within your brand. Everything is relatable somehow. We talked about nostalgia and memory and emotion. These are all things that you can weave into the conversation so that people will have a reaction. That's what we want, right? Reactions make people do something, lean forward, smile, cry, whatever the reaction is. They have to have like some kind of emotion with you. Um, and the experiment is there. Like, obviously, as far as venture capitalists go, I kind of say, let me have this happy problem of being so big that you can't separate me from the brand. Then we can worry about that. Like, what the
Right.
fuck, I mean, come on. But like with the AI, what we've learned is so collaborative AI is a thing. Harvard Business Review has done a few articles. They've cited Lately as a leader in collaborative AI. And what their studies have shown is that collaborative AI outperforms AI alone 2 to 7x all the time across the board, right? And so that's the act of a human course correcting the results, analyzing and course correcting them, right? And so that's the part where the human can come in and say, okay, AI voice, you're sounding a little too robotic for us, or too many emojis. This is not on brand for us. It's just, you pushed us too far. What we've learned, and this is interesting. I mean, so I'm in the business of finding out what words will get people to do what you want them to do. That's what I care about. So I'm always looking at the patterns within those words. And I can see here's some basic tips for the listeners that we can see across the board. All right. Number one, if you read what you write out loud first before you publish it, and you trip over it in any way with your mouth, if the words are, I'll give you an example. I've got one here somewhere that's so good. So this is a coupon from West Elm. I like to buy their pillows a lot. They sent me this in the snail mail. This certificate is issued for reward purposes and is a duplicate of the certificate you received by email, which can be accessed at Comenity.com. Did you hear that? I mean, I'm a professional, so like a lot of enunciation there. What
Yeah.
they're trying to say to me is, hey, dummy, we sent you another coupon in your email and you can't use both of these. Okay. That's all they're trying to say. So
Yeah.
that's a lot
A
easier.
lawyer got a hold of it though.
That's right. Of course, And they used to tell us in radio, like we would rip and read from the Associated Press. So here comes the weather. I'm ripping it off the dot matrix, and it would say all these complicated things about the weather. But all I had to say is, it might rain today. Don't leave your house without an umbrella, right?
Yeah.
So same idea. So that's the first test. The second thing, I'll just give you, like, I can go on and on, but I'll just give you two or three quick tips, is I always back into the problem. So on social media specifically, Kevin, as you know, there's two objectives: click or share. That's what we want, right? And so we want to look at the writing and see if it's geared to any of those things. Clicking is hard. It is hard to get clicks because people have to trust you. In order to get clicks, you can't say things like, "Hey, check out my blog," because why the hell would I do that? What's in it for me? Nothing. You're not giving me any reason. Why should I spend this time? What's the value? So you have to convey the value very quickly, because I have no time and I'm scrolling just like everybody else, and we're judgy and whatever, So like, it's got to be a quick thing. Get taller in 5 seconds, whatever, eat this pill and your hair will be blonde for life. I don't care. But then sharing is much easier, because sharing is about the ego. Like, when you share someone else's content, you get credit for what they did, what they created. It's kind of like in college when, like, somebody shared a great new record with you and then you passed it on to someone else. Now you're the tastemaker, right? So that's why those one-liners do so well, even if they're corny, but like, may you be kind and free throughout your day, whatever. Like, that stuff gets the most shares. It's the one-liners, and it's the controversial stuff, of course. The last sort of favorite tip I have is, people, especially women, tend to undercut the value of what they're saying. I do it all the time. And there's some key words to stay away from, which are needy. Needy person is needy. You don't want to be on the needy team. Like, probably, maybe. Those are all like weak, wishy-washy words. You don't want to say I think, you want to say I know. The reason I want you to do this is because when you sound like an authority, you are commanding trust, and you have to get that trust to get that click. Has to be there. You want to be the authority.
Cool. Well, what's fascinating about the social media ecosystem now is that some of the, I guess you'd say more rapidly growing parts of the ecosystem, like TikTok, I mean, it's almost impossible for there to be a click action, right? Share action, certainly very doable. Like action, pretty doable.
That's right.
But they're designed for you not to click, right? It's designed that you either do some other positive behavior and then you go off to the next one, right? So for marketers, that makes it a little more challenging, because they used to like a Twitter or a Facebook old school, right? Which was, oh yeah, the link was right there, super easy. I have some call to action. The person sees the link or knows where the link is. They can take the link and off they go. And now they're in my environment. Right now they're where I wanted them to be.
Right.
TikTok and
No
Insta,
control.
not so much, right? So,
Yep.
and YouTube sort of sits in the middle, which is, I guess they could put a link below and, but not for shorts, right? So,
Yeah.
it's the social media marketer has a little bit of a conundrum, right? Because it would seem that you're sort of stuck with upper funnel, warm fuzzies, emotional hooks, right? But at the
Mhm.
same time, you'd like to be able to demonstrate to somebody in marketing that it actually moved the needle, right?
That's right.
So,
Yeah.
so bridging that gap for these social media platforms that are not click centric, right?
That's
What are
right.
some
Yeah.
best practices that are perhaps a little bit different for those platforms versus sort of an X or a Facebook where you can still, click out?
Yeah, I was thinking, so you mentioned Kim Kardashian, so I'm a fan of Skims, and what against my better judgment, but I mean, I can't help it. And I love to steal ideas and make them my own. And so I've been thinking a lot about, the FOMO that they've done there. So I mean, the first thing she did was she made the stuff we wear closest to our skin in like 12 different shades of skin color, which was brilliant and genius. Right now, it's very inclusive in that way. And the second thing she did is she made everybody's body like glorified, no matter what size you are. And then the third thing they're doing, which I love, is this drop. It's not like you can go to the store and there's like unlimited numbers of t-shirts available. There's only a few, and they're always running out. Like, so
Yeah,
she's got me, you know?
scarcity, sure, yeah.
Yeah, God, it's so good. And And also sex sells, right? And you can see, like, while she does celebrate other bodies, for the most part, it's very good looking woman. And I've been thinking a lot about how this applies to software because that's my job. And I'm convinced I've got some ideas brewing here, but I'm convinced that Instagram, for example, is not only for CPGs. And we've all seen like HubSpot not do a great job on Instagram, even Jasper, I mean, I'm watching these things, of course, because it's my wheelhouse. And they don't tap into any of those things we just talked about, by the way. And so I'm like, well, why not? There has to be a way. There always is a way to metaphorically apply like somebody else's. It's like the what was remember the ice bucket challenge?
Yeah, sure.
Everybody suddenly wanted an ice bucket challenge. What's their ice bucket
And it
challenge?
only worked once.
It only worked once, right?
Yeah.
But I like, again, this is where that human connection comes in. Like, I'm not going to do this, but could I make Lately sexy? Of course I could. I mean, our icon is me, Kately from Lately, right? So like, I could just boost a few things up here and put it out there. But that's not really on brand, so I'm not going to do that. But anyways, I back to the AI business, which I think is really important, is that as companies are navigating this arena now, they're starting to cotton on to, I think, what you and I knew already, which is, hey, fast is great. Don't get me wrong, but fast is also cheap. So you need to, like Salesforce says, ask more of your AI, right? We're here now, guys. This is not automation. It's artificial intelligence. So if all of it's doing is giving you a lunch break, but it's not giving you more sales, then you need to really rethink like how you're using the AI. And I think this is the year that people are starting to cotton onto that.
Right, right. So for those folks who are out there, and social is a big part of their overall marketing mix, both organic search, social, which of course the algorithms are right in the midst of changing, right? Where it used to be all about the who's posting, and now it's more about the post than it is about the who, right? Because individual
Yep.
posts can sort of break out of the who, at least in most of the platforms now. So how should marketers think about that as they, try to find a way to delight their prospects and customers, and how can AI help them do that more effectively?
Yeah, I mean, it's the cliche, be yourself. Of course, it still is, but that the thing is that charisma is not a taught value. You either have it or you don't. You can't learn it, right? So
Yeah.
cutting through the noise is difficult. That's why, again, you and I are in business. Um, I like to, I mean, I love writing people's biographies. It's one thing I love doing because people often don't know what's great about themselves, and they're hiding it, right? And so that's my favorite thing, is just to talk to someone and see if I can give them like 4 or 5 lines that highlight, what they're wonderful at. And then once you can do that, you can show that on social media.
Yeah.
One thing I like to say to people is, and we met at a mixer, is like, imagine you're at a mixer or meetup or whatever. Is mixer like so old school? What do they call it? A meetup these days? You're at a hang,
I think the
okay?
C-suite, which is where we met, still calls it a mixer, but that's
A
because
mixer. Okay.
yeah, that's because the CEO and founder of C-suite are also from the mixer generation.
You mix it up. It's an in-person event, right? You're glad handing, whatever.
Yeah,
So when you're there, the goal is to not, I believe, is you don't need to be the center of the attention. What you want to be is the person that's making everybody else feel like the center of attention, right? So it's more like a magnetic idea. When you're doing that, when someone walks away feeling like, wow, I feel so great after talking to that person, they never forget you. And this is fans into evangelists, customers, right? Customers and evangelists, listeners into fans. That's what I'm thinking about all the time. Like, I say to my team, don't make a sale, make a fan, because it's so much more valuable.
right.
And people, like you said, like, if there's not a link there, this is my behavior on Instagram. I know not to go to click the link in the bio, because then I'm going to have cookie hell. But I do go into Google, right, and type it in manually all the time. So they're getting me. It's even more powerful than clicking a link. I'm actually having to remember the company maybe search it and go type it in. And that's what I want people to do when they walk away from experience with me or anyone at my company or with my software. Even if they don't become a customer, I want them to walk away being like, wow. And that's what we do, right? So not a day since 2019, not a day has passed where someone hasn't spontaneously written about us on social media.
Well, congrats for that.
It works though. I mean,
Yeah.
this is the job of artificial intelligence, right? And that's why I was saying, like, ask more of what it's getting for you guys, like, and by you guys I mean, the listeners and in general, like, is it life changing for you? Because it should be life changing for you. And if it's not, it's not cutting through the noise. It's just making more noise to put out there, and you're not doing anybody a favor.
So we talked about the fact that some industries perhaps are not synonymous with emotion. I mean, we were
Right.
sort of apologizing to accountants. I mean, maybe the FASB rules are super exciting to some people and they evangelize those all day long. But, emotion in the end is sort of what you're trying to get to the root of, right? Is how do we delight the people who are consuming the content and trigger emotions? And
That's
whether
right.
that was way back in your DJ days and the way that you created that connection and stimulated the emotion. Now, we're looking to potentially to use AI, right? Which almost sounds evil or inauthentic. Like, oh my God, I'm going to use AI to trigger emotion. But at the same time, as marketers, we're like, well, I got to stay in business and I got to sell these widgets, and they are really great. They do solve a problem, right? So that's my objective, to try to figure out how to delight everybody and solve a problem. So how should marketers, think that through and take these more boring categories and infuse them with emotion?
Yeah, it's so hard. I mean, that again, cutting through the noise is where we're still at. And I mean, believe me, I had to write a marketing strategy for tax prep. But like what I thought about was this: if you're getting a $2,000 EITC tax credit and you make $20,000 a year, that is actually life-changing money. What are people doing with this money? Those are the stories we were looking for, right? What can happen when you have this information? And the relatability, I'm just talking about this for a second, like, is, someone would be like, well, how are they living without this knowledge or whatever? And I was like, well, I grew up. I remember being 5 or 6 years old and someone bought me, I had a checkbook and somebody gave me $20 and my mom walked me into the bank and we deposited it, and she had me write down the numbers, and then there was an allowance. And so that kind of behavior is not automatic, right? And so getting people to relate to understanding, like, college is the same way. People who've never been told to go to college don't go to college because it's not part of the lexicon of like how they're, behaving or whatever. So I like to think about, so I have a friend, I got to introduce you to him. His name is David Allison. He owns the Value Graphics database and he consults the United Nations. What David has uncovered after doing millions of surveys across every country in the globe in multiple languages is that there are 54 values, aka drivers of human behavior. Okay, so like productivity, community, the environment, family. There's reasons why we purchase, reasons why we do what we do, right? Everyone has like some other thing behind it. So if you can understand the values that your customers have, and now they have multiple ones, this is so important. We are multifaceted humans. One thing doesn't move all of us. And that's the point. You need to sell not to just one. It's not just this fucking narrow ICP, sorry to swear, but like that drives me crazy,
It's New York. We're in New York, so yeah.
It's near. Okay, yeah, we'll say it. Yeah. So like the when you widen the focus and understand that people are going, you can say, and Lately does this, all right, but you can say the same thing multiple ways and get different people to take action,
For sure.
right?
Yeah.
And in fact, you have to, because now we are all onto it. We don't want to be spammed anymore. And so there's this conundrum that well. The old marketing adage was 7 times you had to have contact with the product before you even knew they existed, right? So that's why like a million commercials. We used to play the same song 300 times to hope you in 1 week, hoping you would hear it once, right? Now it's 24 times that something has to pass your eyeballs or whatever to sink in. So that quantity still has to be there. But if you keep saying I have a Coke and a smile over and over again, I'm like, dude, you're spamming me. I'm out, right? So you need these variables, the variations, and each of the variations can touch on different drivers, different values behind what it is you're selling, right? So like if I'm selling this pencil, and I understand that the value that's going to drive a certain group of my clientele is the environment, then I'm going to let them know that this was made in Cedar Key, Florida, the cedar capital of the world. They only use all natural products, and I don't know, whatever. I'm just making up a bunch of stuff. But if I'm going to sell it to someone else who's like family is their thing, I'm going to be like, this is a family-owned business. 20 people run it. I don't know. You get what I'm saying, right?
Yeah, sure.
So I think and this is all down to just asking your customers and learning about your customers. We're going through this process right now of where we're guessing, and I was like, hey guys, why don't you call some people up and ask them some questions? And they're like, oh, and I'm like, I know we have their phone numbers because we collect it when they put a credit card in. They're like, we can just send them. We sent them an email last week and nobody responded. I'm like, yeah, call them. Someone will answer the phone. And if you guys can't I know that I could make them answer the phone. I can figure out how to text somebody or get in a conversation. Like, it's not that hard to do. And guess what? You actually really only need to talk with like 3 people. And chances are one of them or 2 of them will say some of the same stuff and you got your answer, right? Move on, iterate.
Yep. Cool. Well, lots of stuff for people to chew on and think about as they, take their businesses and try to, reinvigorate them with emotion and get their prospects and customers to engage. And obviously, Lately.ai is how they'll find you if they need to. Thanks so much for joining me on the podcast. Great stuff.
I love you, Kevin. Thanks so much.
Kevin Lee's Power Marketing is available on all your favorite podcast networks. Kevin loves helping businesses excel at marketing. Having marketing challenges? Just like Santa in The Miracle on 34th Street, if Kevin can't help you, he'll know someone who can. Find him on LinkedIn, subscribe, or follow.